The Leominster City Council meeting is funded in part by DeCarolis Insurance Agency at www.decarolisinsuranceagency.com and by Avidia Bank at www.avidiabank.com.
Mr. Chairman, it's 6:30. You can start with your hearing.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a continued public hearing on 2-25. Massachusetts Electric Company, doing business as National Grid, requests permission to locate poles, wires, and fixtures, including the necessary sustaining and protecting fixtures along and across the following public way. Lancaster Street, National Grid to install one solely owned pole on Lancaster Street beginning at a point approximately 190 feet southeast of the center line of the intersection of Central Street and Lancaster Street. National Grid will be installing new pole 2-84 and guy to replace tree guy since the tree is being removed at Leominster, Mass. Location approximately as shown on plan attached. My name is Brandon Robbins. I'm the chair of the committee. Also on the committee is the clerk, Councilor Claire Frieda, and the third member, Councilor Sue Shalafu-Zephyr. This hearing has been continued a few times, mainly with regard to the condition of the tree. I spoke with the constituent who had indicated that he would be willing to hire an arborist to look at the tree earlier today. He decided to not go that route. So that's kind of where the update on that stands. I will also share he was very appreciative of the committee and the council's work on and just for hearing him out. So I'll go to members of the committee first. Councilor Frieda, do you have any questions or comments?
I would still like to see the tree stay there, but I was looking forward to hearing an arborist report to say that it was healthy. And we didn't get that, so I'm not sure I'll see how the other member of the committee feels.
Councilor Shalafu-Zephyr?
Yep. I still feel very strongly that the tree should stay. It's the only tree in that whole section of Lancaster Street, so coming either into the city, it's the only non-telephone pole thing on either side of Lancaster Street, on either side. And I think it's a pretty tree. And I think it adds a lot to that section, so I am not in favor of the city taking it down.
Claire, anything else? Anything else, Sue?
No.
Any other members of the council have any questions or comments on the petition? Seeing none, I'll go to members of the public. Any member of the public like to speak in favor of or against 2-25? A second time, any member of the public like to speak in favor of against 2-25? And for a third and final time, any member of the public like to speak in favor of against 2-25? Seeing none, I will declare this public hearing closed, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Our next hearing is at 6:40, in about 7 minutes or so. And we'll take that up then. 2 Tuesday meetings in a row, right? No, not in a row, but 2 out of 3. Right. No. Strange how that fell. Mr. Chairman, it's 6:40. If you'd like to begin the hearing on 5-25.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening. My name is Peter Angelini, Chairman of Legal Affairs Committee. I'm joined here this evening by the other 2 members of Legal Affairs, Ward 1 Councilor Robert Tossi and Ward 2 Councilor Pauline Cormier. This is petition 5-25. Elizabeth Wood, on behalf of the Planning Board, requests that the City Council amend the zoning ordinance pertaining to dimensional requirements for Residence B and Residence C districts. Good evening. Mr. Boyle, Ms. Wood, and Mr. Souza. Do you have a presentation you'd like to begin with?
I'll kick off.
Go right ahead. You have the floor.
Sorry about that. As we're well aware, we have a housing crisis. I'm not going to get into that because you're so well versed on that. But I will say the Housing Committee has been working diligently to come up with solutions to try to allow for more housing in Leominster. So what we did was we started looking at the zoning ordinance to see what amendments could possibly be made to allow for more housing. And we were fortunate enough to get a grant, a DLTA grant, to hire some outside expertise from the MRPC. That's why we have Joseph Boyle here tonight. He was able to work with the Housing Committee and work with myself and the chairman here to look and do a deep dive into our zoning ordinance and come up with some suggestions. So we're starting with the first hearing, but the second one is part of the same process where we dove in and looked at changing first the dimensional requirements for Residence B and Residence C districts to allow for more density. Joseph is the person who did most of the research on that and worked together with us, so I'm going to let him get into the details of the actual proposal.
Before Mr. Boyle starts, I just want to note that we can't act as a city council until the planning board has its hearing, which I understand is scheduled for the 7th of October.
The planning board is scheduled to have a hearing on the 7th of October.
On both 525 and 725 as well. And we'll be doing this again. After your hearing, we'll continue this public hearing so that we have your input before we have our final public hearing on this. So I just want to point that out before we get into too much detail tonight.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Good evening, councilors. Joseph Boyle from the Montezut Regional Planning Commission. I'm here to present the zoning amendments. Elizabeth provided the process working with the zoning committee, with the housing committee, and the foundation of this, the amendment regarding the RB and the RC districts. It was the charge I was given, and what I attempted to do was to look through the dimensional requirements in the zoning and in the residential districts and look for areas where there were restrictions on housing production, which were just restrictions on the number of units that could be produced and weren't also providing any sort of protection in terms of protecting neighborhood quality of life or otherwise justified by sound planning principles. And what I found in that were in the RB and the RC districts, your minimum lot sizes were set with a per unit minimum. In the RB for multifamily housing, for example, it was 8,500 square feet per unit, meaning it would be, for a 3-family house, it would be well over half an acre. Leominster's zoning, now obviously for multifamily housing, you need more land to provide for things like parking and landscaping and the size of the building itself. And so now lots containing multifamily homes, it's appropriate they're going to be larger. But Leominster zoning already contains robust setback, site plan review, and parking requirements, which will by themselves do that work of making sure there's enough space on the lot, making sure the lot is big enough that everything that's required for the, to provide those accoutrements for the multifamily housing units will be provided without unfairly burdening the rest of the neighborhood. The lots will naturally become larger as they need to provide for more parking, as they need to provide a larger building footprint. And by providing these requirements, these per unit square foot requirements, they weren't really providing another layer of protection in those areas. They're simply functioning to keep down the number of units that can be built in your city. 30 years ago, this type of this type of zoning was fairly popular because we weren't in a housing crisis, and reducing unit production was looked at as a positive thing from a fiscal point of view. The marching order, the world's changed since then. And everybody on the council, I'm sure, is well aware of the need for housing. So in this case, we're recommending that there isn't really a benefit to the community in simply keeping down the number of units. That the legitimate and important purposes of site design, of making sure that sufficient parking and setbacks and everything are met, those will be adequately met by the provisions of your zoning. And simply capping the number of units is no longer in Leominster's interest.
Mr. Souza, would you like to say anything before I pose a question to Mr. Boyle?
Okay, I'm on now. Yeah, we've looked at this, and the Housing Committee looked at it, and again, what Mr. Boyle says is, essentially, in the same square foot area, we'll be able to get, more units, more people in new homes being built. So this is the first step of a number of steps that we're seeing, where they're trying to get more things that we've seen where the state has passed a law where residential A, you can now put apartments onto them. And that's with little or no restrictions whatsoever. And we've got to work towards how we can control that a little bit. Where we already have we call it the in-law apartment regulation. So this is pretty much going forward, and the state is pushing the MBTA community. I heard that was on TV today, where they're requiring us to go to 14 stories in some locations. So it's just way out of what category. So I think it's Milford, one of the towns that's taking them to court. So, but we want to get that aside. With the marching orders that we had, a committee was formed, and we've looked at a number of different things over about a 6-month period, a little bit longer, and looked at a lot of things. And this is the first cut that we have, and there are going to be some others coming down the road to take and increase the densities that we have. When we look at the history a little bit, and I'll take Fitchburg and Leominster as a comparison. Fitchburg had the old mills, and most of the mill factory owners built multifamily houses on relatively small lots close to their factories. Everybody walked to work, okay? Leominster had some mills, but not to the density that Fitchburg had. So Leominster developed more as a suburban city. Let's call Fitchburg an urban city. Fitchburg is and Leominster being a suburban, where most people drove to work. So there were larger lots, bigger houses, and less density. What we're finding ourselves in the situation in Leominster today, we're land poor. A huge percentage of the city, I think we've done the right things. We've preserved it in open space, okay? But in doing that, We've also restricted severely the available land so we could build on. So the only solution that we have is to put more apples in the bag, or, push in or and go up, and to multiply. So this is where we're going. It seems to be a solution. We're trying to work it out the best that we can. The planning board has spent some time on it. The building committee, the housing committee has spent more on it. So that's where we stand. We're still planning, like we will be having a hearing. We wanted to get the ball rolling, as you say, and that's why we're here tonight.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Boyle, let me direct this first question to you. To me, the most important question here is, how many units will we create if we were to adopt this amended zoning?
Boy, that's a very tough question to answer, because that would require going parcel by parcel through the district and doing a build-out analysis for each property, and then we'd have to take a guess at how many property owners would actually be interested in doing that. I'm sorry I can't be more specific.
So the short answer is we have no idea.
Right. The short answer is we have no idea.
Okay.
I don't expect that this would increase the development potential of any properties by a lot. It's not going to double the number of units or triple the number of units that any properties can do. I think the more likely scenario is there was a 30,000, 29,000 square foot lot that could previously have been 3 units and can now be 4.
All right.
That's the scale.
All right, so if that information is unavailable, let me go to my second question, which was, I noticed you took the wetlands component out of the zoning.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and of course, the mission statement, does say, the goal of this amendment is to remove arbitrary caps on the number of units that can be developed on any given parcel in residential zoning, while still maintaining the same level of protection, neighborhood character, quality of life. Leominster zoning ordinance has robust setbacks, height limits, maximum lot coverage requirements, parking requirements, and other zoning restrictions that ensure adequate space for multifamily developments. These requirements naturally compel larger lot sizes for multifamily projects with additional units. In addition, Leominster's site plan approval ordinance provides another level of protection for multifamily projects. The additional lot area per dwelling unit standard is serving only to limit housing production without advancing values like better site design, environmental protection, or consistency with community character. For these reasons, the MRPC recommends the adoption of the proposed zoning amendment. So, from someone who was a former Conservation Commission member, I can tell you that just like the Planning Board does, I'm sure on occasion, you wrestle around with a development and you make some concessions to try to, so in a lot of instances, I'm sure Conservation Commissions may have said, well, we really don't want development encroaching on this wetland or in this riverfront area, and they came to some kind of agreement, and then that wetland area is protected. And obviously, I think we recognize the utility of those wetland areas after the rain event we've had in the past. So encroaching on these wetland areas, adding more impervious surface, generally doesn't hurt the site, that particular site, but it affects the person's down gradient from the site. So making the wetlands component disappear leads me to believe there'd be more attempts for people to snug the development right up against the buffer zone of the wetland area, causing some additional problems that maybe hadn't been given a lot of consideration. I could be wrong, but.
See, I see where you're going, and I certainly agree with the necessity for wetlands protection. I would argue that the language in here about upland, the minimum lot size per dwelling unit being upland area, not wetlands area, that isn't actually a wetlands protection. That doesn't require buildings to be further away from wetlands. It doesn't limit the the lot coverage on the upland areas. It is not counting the it's just part of the formula for how many units you're able to get on the lot.
Yeah.
And it's not counting that wetland area to figure out the number of units that can get on the lot. It's a unit number reduction bylaw or ordinance, which isn't actually a wetlands protection ordinance.
No.
They still have the state wetlands regs that mandate the distances from wetlands and things like that, and mandate the protection and provide the Conservation Commission with review of them.
I'm acutely aware of that, but my point, I think, was that 10 years ago, a Conservation Commission, the makeup of the Conservation Commission is completely different today. So when someone goes back in to look at adding more units on a particular site that may have already been the subject of some compromise, some give and take from the original development, it's sort of now without the wetlands component in the formula, you're sort of opening the door and saying, well, maybe Leominster's abandoning that former sort of stance we had where you didn't want to allow the wetlands in the formula to give you a square footage of land required for these additional units. And therefore, the new members of the commission may not understand, how we got to the current place with a particular wetland being protected, or a riverfront area, or whatever, the amount of impervious surface, roof lines, parking, etc. And I've heard not a million, but a significant amount of proposals from engineers telling us about drainage calculations, and the drainage is going to change, but somehow magically, the more development we get, the more drainage issues we seem to have. So all those things have to be, I think, part of the overall picture that we have to look at when we talk about amended zoning, looking at add additional development in areas that may not be suitable for it.
Right. Now, the term you used there, more development. Okay, things like more surface area being paved is something that would be associated with more development. A bigger building footprint, which is also providing more impervious surface area, things like that. This proposed amendment would not change any of those. It would allow, if a site is built out in accordance with a DEP, with a Wetlands Protection Act permit, and this changes, and this zoning changes. Say the zoning changes so that the lot that we're talking about used to be able to be built out to 3 units. Now it might be possible to build it out to 4 units. Being able to build that 4th unit doesn't allow them to pave any more surface. It doesn't allow them to increase the size of the building without going back for another wetlands permit. This is what I mean by saying this isn't actually a wetlands protection bylaw.
No, I understand.
It's just formula for the number of units. And changing the number of units doesn't necessarily change the environmental impact by increasing the impervious surface, getting closer to the wetland or anything like that. And this change wouldn't allow any of those things to happen.
All right, I'm going to move on because I'm sure the council's up, but I have a bunch of questions that I think I'll probably take a stab at next time. But certainly, I know from where I'm sitting, my perspective, it would be really helpful when we come down here with these types of zonings, amendments, proposals, that we have some idea of the number of units that potentially be created that the zoning would allow, so we'll have some kind of an idea. Because as Mr. Souza noted, we now have the legislature mandating that, without special permit or by right, people can do accessory apartments. So I think we're losing control of our zoning, to be quite frank with you. And so I'd like to know, if we do amend something, adopt some of these zoning changes, I'd like to know what we're looking at. What kind of, how many units? I mean, it seems like a very obvious question. We do have a GIS database. I know we can put layers for zone B and C.
I can see what we can come up with for an estimate.
All right.
It can at least get you a range.
Mr. Chairman, we're just about at 7 o'clock, so we're going to open the meeting very shortly. Mr. Boyle, I'd just like to add the 4 units for 30,000 square feet. I think you're off. When you come back, I'd like to see your calculation on that, because I did it myself, and I got a lot more than that. So I would like you to be prepared when you come back this is going to get continued, as you know. But in any event, it's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to ask the council to join me in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll take a roll call of the councils in attendance, starting with Councilor David Cormier.
Present.
Councilor Pauline Cormier.
Present.
Councilor Ardinger.
Present.
Councilor Angelini.
Present.
Councilor Tossi.
Present.
Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Present.
Councilor Robbins.
Present.
Councilor Frida.
Present.
I'll be recorded as present. All 9 city councilors are in attendance. Does the chairwoman of records have a report?
I do, Mr. President. I have reviewed the changes to the August 26, 2024 minutes. I find them to be in good order. And unless anyone has any other changes they'd like to make, I would ask that they be placed on file.
Seeing no objection, those may be placed on file. At this point, I'd ask for a motion to recess.
So moved.
Councilor Shalfo Zephyr, second Councilor Frida, all in favor? Please recognize usual manner. We are in recess. Councilor Angelini, you can continue with your 5-25 hearing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me go to members of legal affairs. I don't want to take up all the time in this hearing tonight. Councilor Tossi, do you have any questions you'd like to pose for the panelists?
Yes, how does this all affect traffic? I know we really don't know how many additional units there are going to be or can be, but there's always the traffic factor, at least when I drive around town, is a significant amount of traffic.
As part of,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, as part of site plan, the planning board looks at traffic and requires a traffic study. And sometimes if it's a big enough project, we'll send it out for peer review. So we get a consultant's opinion on the applicant's traffic study.
Anything further, Councilor Tossi?
Nope.
Councilor
I'd like
Paul?
to add, I think, I agree, no matter what we do, we're going to see an increase in traffic. We've seen a steady increase in traffic as the city grows. And we don't add any more streets. So when you get the same streets and you got more people, it's just, but we've got to try to be smarter in our development, in making some changes when there are larger singles. You can't do much about one or two changes on a lot here and there. It's really by right, and it doesn't make this. You can't calculate it. It's the larger projects that we can, and in those we can require roads to be done, and we can require lighting to be changed and traffic patterns to be done. So that's always, I agree with you. It's always one of the first questions that we look at is traffic. But I wish I had a solution.
Councilor Pauline Cormier?
Yeah, can we just break this down to a little more simply? Because I know we have constituents and people that are watching and they hear Residence B, Residence C districts. What are we really talking about? Are we talking about a single-family home in a neighborhood where there's enough distance between the house next door that they could add another building, perhaps an in-law, or even one of these tiny homes or something in the back? Is that what we're talking about? Are we talking about only new builds? Are we talking about old established? What are we talking about as far as if we open it up and let them put in bigger units or more units, as he discussed? So is this in a residential neighborhood? Is this in, I'm just trying to break it down, make it a little more simple.
I'll do it. The difference is we have three basic residential districts. You have your residential A, which is your single-family home, and four really, a single-family home on a quarter-acre lot. We have rural residential, which is basically your farmland, and those are at least one-acre lots. Residential B, you start getting to a little more density. And using the old figures, we would pretty much figure that we would have in that lot size, which was a smaller lot, we would have 5 units. And then residential C was in the 20,000, it moved up to 8 units. Be like Ward 2, okay? And where you have bigger homes on smaller lots. And that's pretty much what we're doing is we're sliding, as I see it, and it's really hard to judge because in a lot of cases it comes up to individual to add to the home that they have or to the building they have. And that's what makes it so difficult, is that you're sliding the residential C a little bit more and squeezing the B, you know, so you're getting more density, I think more in B. I think C in most cases is pretty well. But it's also in new development is where we'll see the bigger difference. Like we got one coming up now that's before the board on Pleasant Street, where that's what,
20 units, 22.
22 units, okay? And there'll be parking underneath, and so they can get the parking and the densities. Yet we're also still dealing with the wetlands in the back, and the impervious surface stays as it was previously. So the build, by allowing some different things, they get more housing onto a smaller lot. And in certain areas where that's more of a downtown off of Pleasant Street, we're also probably looking to reduce traffic, to reduce the parking requirements. But those are different things that we can do in the future, and we're working to. We're taking, you know, bits and pieces at this thing. Remember, the zoning was. I saw a zoning book from 1960 once, and it was about 8 pages, folded over like that. You know, now how many pages we got? Yeah, we got a great big book, and you know, it covers the same thing.
153 pages.
150 pages. So we've gone from, in 1960, 8 pages, half-page pamphlet to 150, 160 pages. So things get, and plus we got to contend with the, you know, state legislature. They keep on coming up with ideas that are great for Boston, for out here they're terrible. And I don't know how to deal with those because the legislature said you have to do it. So we're trying to work with it. Now, that's the tough part.
Okay. I'm sorry, I tried to make it simpler.
Yeah.
So am I gonna have people call me and say, listen, I've owned my house, it's a 60s ranch, I got plenty of land.
Mhm.
Is my neighbor gonna sell that 60s ranch and then somebody's gonna put a set of 4 townhouses right next to me?
That could happen, yes.
It could happen.
And therein lies our issue.
That's right.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to know. That's the question that I wanted to have answered was, so now these people that have these smaller single-family homes, those, you know, like I said, the neighbor could buy it and somebody could put in 4 townhouses.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
No, they could do that now. What this amendment would do is, if somebody who might be able to do a 2 would be, and that's a 2-family in that situation, might be able to do a 3. Somebody who would have previously been able to do a 3 might be able to do a 4. This is, and for these small lots like this, first of all, none of the setbacks are changing. So whatever the neighbor could put in after this zoning can't get any closer or be any taller than what they'd be able to do before the adoption of this zoning. What this would change in that circumstance is, in some cases, a property owner who did that might get another unit.
Okay. So let's not give anybody any ideas until this is,
That they don't already have.
right. Okay, thank you,
Right, no
Mr.
additional
Chairman.
land uses are authorized, and no setbacks or height requirements are changed in this.
Or parking.
Or parking requirements.
Okay.
All set, Council?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let me open it up to the council. Councilor Arnder, I saw your hand go up.
Yes, thank you very, very much. We've talked about housing and stuff like that, but the issue that I see with all this more dense zoning, the MBTA, the ADUs, and this, you know, all coming together. What about our school system? What about our police, fire, and fire? How is it going to affect the city, you know, economically to have all these additional units all of a sudden, if they happen? I mean, it's all arbitrary, but That's the downside, is that we have a lot more people, a lot more kids going to school, a lot more traffic, as the Councilor from Ward 1 talked about, and we have more, need more police and more fire. How is that being taken into consideration?
No one knows.
No one knows.
No
That's
one
it.
knows.
No one knows. I mean, that's,
It's,
yeah.
and that is not part of our consideration.
Well, then,
It never has been, okay? But what we see is, if you look at the demographics of the population, there were fewer families, large families. So in essence, our population of our school system has stayed about the same, even though the total population of the city has grown. It's close, okay? I'm not saying that's a real answer to it, but that's what happens. Things to fluctuate that are totally outside of our purview, or that we can even look at, and we just don't know. But what we have to do is, if the city, if we don't do certain things like right, wrong, I think we saw on the paper or on the internet last week, Leominster was number 7 in the country on the growth of real estate, okay, on the ability, because it was most difficult. And so that's a situation that's it's born out of people moving west. And we can't control that. What this does is we have to supply housing for the city to grow. We have to have more housing, okay? And the only way is put more apples on the back to get more onto the property. Now, but at the same time, we're trying to be very cautious on controlling the things that we can't control. I can control setbacks, I can control height, I can control parking, okay? And as long as we keep those controls, we think that will keep the character of the city as we have it. But it's not blown open that way. It can take a lot that had 3 apartments on it, making it 10. That's not happening. But we have to have some growth.
Are you sure about that?
Sure?
I don't know.
You don't know, because I'm telling you, Mr. Boyle, bring the calculations in. We're gonna have an interesting little analysis.
Yeah.
And I understand what you're saying as a planning board, but as a city councilor sitting here, I have to look at what the taxpayers are going to be burdened with, and that is a major concern for me.
Yeah.
School, fire, police, it's going to be, who knows? Who knows?
We don't know.
You're asking us to buy a pig in a poke.
Well, I think we're going to have to do something. I'm not sure what we're going to do. All we can do is make recommendations. The mayor came to us and said, we have an issue. Other people have come to us, we have an issue. So we said, okay, as a board, we'll form a committee, and we brought in developers, not just city workers, there are developers involved, in contractors and legislators involved, number of different people from different walks of life. So we tried to get a cross-section of what can we do, because there is a housing. We got to do something, and doing nothing is not an answer. But I'm not, we're trying, this was our best guess. So I don't know where to go from here.
We have an issue because the state is mandating things to us that they have no idea what they're mandating.
I agree with you that 100%. I said that earlier when I talked about the MBTA communities. Okay, they're down in Boston, and they think the end of the state stops at 128. So, out here, a funny little story. Years ago, when we put in the train station, we had the guy come in, and the head of the MBTA, and he makes his speech, and he starts out, and he says, I'm glad to be out here in the western part of the state. And and that's the attitude that they have. And I walked up to him later, I said, the end of the state's 100 miles that way. And he just looked at me, and he didn't know what to say.
I have no further questions.
Councilor. Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr.
I just have a comment. New residential development brings with it property tax revenue. So it may not cover dollar for dollar whatever kinds of services these people need, but it certainly does expand the tax revenue that the city will collect. So, you know, if people come in and they have kids in the school, once you have kids in the schools, you know, that's usually a net negative, right, in terms of what it's generating in terms of tax revenue versus the cost. But if you have, you know, young people coming here with no kids, or young people coming here with small families, or whoever, older people who want to downsize into a smaller unit in a nice neighborhood, that will generate property tax revenue. So, and, you know, we've got some really nice businesses downtown. We have some nice restaurants. You know, we have other nice stores in the city, and people will, you know, spend money there. You know, maybe they'll walk downtown. They'll go to, you know, any one of the restaurants down there and patronize other small businesses that are around. So I understand the challenges, and I understand the traffic problems, because, you know, I live on West Street and understand how, you know, heavy traffic is. And if you try to get through, you know, Merriam and Lindell Avenue, that light at any time of day, you know, you're going to be there for a while. So those are the challenges, but the city has to, you know, look at those and deal with those. But again, I don't want anybody, you know, to think that, you know, any of these new costs are just going to be, you know, dumped on the rest of the taxpayers, because these people are actually, in fact, you know, the builders are going to be taxpayers as well.
And one other point I'd like the council to keep in mind, not all housing units produce the same amount of traffic, the same amount of off-street parking, and put the same number of kids in the schools. In particular, rental units tend to put far fewer kids into the schools than large lot single-family homes. A 5-bedroom, 3-bath house on an acre over the next 40 years is going to put a lot more kids into your schools than a 2-bedroom apartment above a storefront in your downtown. Same thing with the number of cars that are going to be parked at that place and the amount of traffic that's generated by it. Now, I apologize. I have to step away. I have another meeting that I had tonight. I did not realize that we would be here so long. I will be back before you to talk about these zoning amendments as soon as I can.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
And I will speak, some communities, and this is a whole new can of worms that Leominster hasn't done, but other communities have something called impact fees. When there's new development, they charge for the schools, they charge for the fire. That's something, if we think this is going to be a problem, we can visit that, we can do research, we can get an actuary to calculate how much the impact would be and what the fees should be. That's something to think about.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, some developers, we used to require open space, right, as kind of a trade-off. You know, if you're going to build so many condominiums or homes or whatever, you know, there needed to be some kind of space left open, you know, either for the public to use or, you know, other folks to use. So I think understanding how impact fees could be designed, I think would be an interesting thing for us to discuss, certainly in light of this project, yeah. Thank you.
There are a lot of different options you had. We experimented when we did it, got to be 20 years ago now, where we did, you mentioned the open space. There were probably 6 or 7, if not more, open space subdivisions in the city where the houses are on quarter-acre lots rather than half-acre lot. And the half-acre is in is under a conservation restriction.
Right.
And will not be built, and that's our open space. And it's nice to take a ride. You might go up the Bridle Cross or up on North Leominster. There's a couple over off of Pleasant Street where these were built, and you can see that they've turned out to be, as they developed over the years, very nice little communities into themselves and nice developments. And really, you look at them, the houses don't look like they're that close, yet they're on lots, they're on half the size, okay, of a standard lot. So sometimes our perception of what we have and then actuality, because there was a lot of discussion around doing that, you know, way back when. And it's worked out. I've never had a complaint from anybody that's, and in fact, it's just the opposite. Most of the people love it. The houses are a little bit closer. The neighborhoods are they do all kinds of programs and projects. And I know my son lives in one of them, and they have barbecues together and things like that. So sometimes it's not bad.
I'm going to have to move it along.
Yeah, go ahead.
Councilor Frida, I know you were waiting patiently.
Oh, thank you. As far as the housing committee goes, I'm not quite sure it's all walks of life. I mean, it's department heads, developers, and I don't think there's anybody else other than me, and I'm from the council. So I'm not quite sure where there's all walks of life there, so I'll disagree with that a little bit. But one of the concerns on the housing committee, and I don't know if this came about the same way, is attorneys coming in representing individuals who have a lot. They want zoning changed on a particular lot because they've got a plan to develop it. And, wait a second, the concern, and I think we've expressed it on the committee, and I'm going back a way now, but the concern is, going back to the Ward 2 councilor's comment, when you make a decision on one parcel for one developer or one homeowner, change that zoning, it changes it for the whole city. So the character of the whole city changes with that one small parcel. So, I mean, that's happened a couple of times on the committee as well. So,
Yeah.
go ahead,
And each
Elizabeth.
time that's happened, the housing committee has not endorsed that developer's proposal. The housing committee has said you need to petition the city council on your own. We're not forwarding it. These petitions before you tonight are not from developers.
Okay, so that didn't come from the idea of
These are not
couple
from
that we heard?
developers.
No.
None
No?
of them are.
Okay.
There is one coming before you that's from the developers that
Yeah,
we sent your
that
way,
I'm aware of, yeah.
but we didn't endorse that.
Okay. But there was another one that was discussed at the housing committee.
And it wasn't endorsed.
And it didn't come back,
It
okay.
hasn't come
No.
back yet.
All right.
So we took it under advisement and said, but we're very, very cautious of what we call spot zoning. And that's always been something that I've looked at, and just looked at, no, we can't do that, it's spot zoning. Or it's, it's too finite, because we're looking for generalities, so we're trying to look at the city as a whole. And not saying that somebody doesn't come in and say, well, look at that, and maybe it'll work in other locations. At that point, we would consider it. But yeah, I agree with you, we knew that would happen. But we're trying to get, there are people who have a lot of different inputs, and we tried to get a mix of people, not to, exclude anybody, because I think there was an open statement, if anybody was interested in the city to be on the committee, they were more than welcome to be there.
Right.
So I don't think anybody was excluded, and we're also cautious about certain people being on there and their vested interest.
Yeah, well, the point I'm making, and even eliminate my last comment, anything that we change is gonna be throughout the whole city.
That is correct.
Correct.
So what affects Ward 2 differently than Ward 4 or Ward 5
That's
is
correct.
still gonna have an effect.
True.
And it does go both ways. I mean, we do have to look at it cautiously. I can remember in the 80s, when the building boom started, and there was Independence and Bicentennial and Jamestown, and everything was booming. Lunenburg took a jump ahead and panicked. They changed all their zoning to 2 acres at the time. You
Right.
remember that, John? And 4 or 5 years later, their schools were eliminating programs, cutting, because people weren't going to Lunenburg because they couldn't afford to live there and build. They couldn't buy land at 2 acres.
Right.
So there are the two sides, but, with the ADUs and the mandates on Residence A, I mean, I don't even know if we're gonna have Residence A in 10 years. I mean, it might not even be 5 years. It's
Hear
changing
ya.
so drastically that, Residence A is turning into a multifamily, but.
Yeah, I agree, and that's, I don't know, we're gonna go back to the state and fight with the state legislatures and say, hey, guys,
Yeah, well, that's not gonna happen
cut it out.
real quick.
Because,
but-
let's face it, what's good in Brookline, it doesn't work here.
Well, I think, we've got to be cautious with it, and I'm a little concerned about changing the Residence B requirements, and, it'd be interesting to see what, how your public hearings play out, and then come back to us.
On that
Okay.
score, will you have an opinion for us within a day or two of your October 7th meeting?
It'll be that night, and then I'll write it up and get it to the council.
Because we have to schedule another public hearing in the wake of your recommendation.
Right,
So I
Right.
want to make sure that we give you enough time.
yeah. We're trying to get all the inputs.
Because we'll be
that we
doing this
can.
all over again.
This is not a 1 or 2 meeting thing, I think, you know.
No, but my point is
Yeah.
you're going to have a hearing
Yeah,
on
on the-
5/25 on October 7.
Exactly.
I just want to make sure that we can schedule this on the 15th of October with confidence that your recommendation will be to us before the 15th of
Oh,
October.
yeah.
Okay.
I'll do it.
I just want to add to what the president just said. I think it's important for the public that's watching. We have to have by law, we need to have your opinion and your recommendation, but we do not have to follow it.
That is
We
correct.
can have our own recommendation down here and vote the way we want. It doesn't have to be,
I've said that many times.
I'm just for the
No,
public
it-
who's listening to both comments here.
You know, a lot of people come to us and say, well, the planning board just know is all we do is we enact the wishes of the city council. They're responsible for the city ordinances. We're responsible for the subdivision regulations, how they build things and that stuff, and the sequence and how things get done. But the ordinances on the setbacks and what goes where, that's your purview. And I'm not about to change that.
I'm good.
Thank you, Counselor. Are there any other counselors that would like to weigh in? You're going to get another opportunity shortly. All right, at this point, seeing no other counsel, let me go to the public. Is there anyone in attendance this evening that would like to speak either in favor of or in opposition to, or just has a general comment about petition 5-25? Excuse me. For the second time, is there anyone in the public out in the audience tonight that would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to petition 5-25? And for the third and final time, excuse me, is there anyone in attendance this evening that would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to petition 5-25? Seeing none, Mr. President, I'm going to keep this public hearing open, obviously, for the aforementioned
Sure.
reasons.
We'll vote on a continued public hearing date further time, a little later on in the agenda.
Exactly, thank you.
You now can start your hearing on 7-25,
All right.
which hopefully will be brief,
Yeah,
for the same reason.
I think we covered most of it.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. 7-25, once again, this is a public hearing of the Legal Affairs Committee. Petition 7-25, Elizabeth Wood, on behalf of the Planning Board, request to amend the zoning ordinance pertaining to upper story dwelling units, see attached. I noticed, I'm sorry Mr. Boyle left, but on the accompanying material, Ms. Wood, it refers to the recommended amendments under Article 1, Section 22-17, and Article 1, Section 22-18. That, I believe that's a typo. It should be Article 3.
Article 3?
Article 3, Section 22-17, and Article 3, Section 22-18,
Okay.
because there is no Article 1, Section 22-17. All right. Having done that, once again, I will give you the opportunity, if you have a little presentation, you'd like to just give us an overview of the petition, how we arrived here, and we'll go around again.
This petition has the same background as the other one with the housing, originating in the Housing Committee, so I'm not going to rehash that. It's the same purpose. We have the housing crisis. We're trying to allow for more housing units. So this one adds a category for upper story dwelling units allowed by special permits in the RC and MUT zones and by right in the B, A, BB, and V zones. And by doing so, we're hoping to increase housing options. It's a new category.
Okay, you folks will be meeting on this one on the 7th as well.
We'll be meeting on the 7th and having a
Sending us a
recommendation.
recommendation.
All right, I'm going to reserve my questions for that night. I'll go to members of Legal Affairs, Councilor Tossi,
Nothing.
Councilor Pauline Cormier,
No questions, thank you.
members of the council, Councilor Frida.
I may be wrong, but if you have questions, I'd like to hear them. because we should be able to think about those while they're having their, I mean, we don't have to get into long discussions, but I think if you have concerns as the chair, then we should hear some of the,
Counsel, I totally agree with you. It's the fact that Mr. Boyle has left us, and he's basically been the architect of some of these things, so I suspect, from my own perspective, I think it'd be better for me to get sort of the information from the horse's mouth.
I can add to that too, at least in part, the genesis of this was the MBTA zoning
I
that
know.
Mr. Boyle is working on. And it was part of the overall overarching plan for the MBTA review that's being done currently for the city. So I agree with the chairman. We kind of need Mr. Boyle here for.
I just think we should tell the public what we're thinking about as the planning people are sitting here. Let them know what discussions are gonna take place.
Well, why don't you give me some examples? You got some examples of, primarily, this is more downtown, okay? Where there may be businesses today. We could add a second story to that building, okay? I don't think it's a big change when I looked at it. Because and again, it's in existing lot sizes, so your lot sizes don't change, and it's just making some buildings more efficient.
Yeah, for the public, this is commercial uses that are in existence.
Right.
To allow, I mean, it kind of harkens back to the old business zoning where you had, a storefront on the first level and apartments on the second level. This is sort of streamlining the ability to do this depending on which zone. Some zones you'll need zoning relief to do it. Other zones it'll be by right. The ones where characteristically it's already existed.
Right.
And in fact, we've done things already with the business zoning as a council to facilitate that. This one's not nearly, in my humble opinion, as sweeping as 5-25 is.
Right.
But it is a change, and I'm sure you folks will take it up on the 7th, and we'll hear a detailed recommendation from you with respect to
Exactly.
it.
It's less of an impact, but it gives us some flexibility to maybe increase some of the densities in the downtown area. And to say it's available, we make it available for somebody that doesn't force them into doing it, and there's still somebody who's got to do it. So we've had some inquiries. Who knows? It just it may happen, but it gives us another tool, you might say. But it's a small impact, I think.
The public, Mr. Chairman, maybe?
Yes,
Unless the
indeed.
county councilors have any more?
I didn't see any hands go up. Let me go to the public. Is there anyone in attendance this evening that would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to petition 7-25? For the second time, is there anyone in attendance this evening that would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to, or just to have a general comment about petition 7-25? And for the third and final time, is there anyone in attendance this evening that would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to petition 7-25? Seeing none, Mr. President, we'll keep this public hearing open as well, and we'll address the action next time
Very well.
around in the calendar.
Council Frida?
Yeah, just a quick question. We talked about this for a half hour. I'm just curious how you're gonna get through this whole Residence B and Residence C in 1 minute. You got your first hearing at 6:30, the second one at 6:31.
We open them, but this discussion's not going to happen within a minute.
Okay,
It's just the way that the agenda's set up.
all right.
What'll happen is,
We'll
Because-
discuss them both
because-
at the same time.
because there are so many things that are interconnected in the two, we open them both at the same time. In essence, we'll be discussing both things.
You
at
can't read the
same-
petition in 1 minute.
No. But it allows us to, be more flexible in our actual discussion in our meeting. But when we vote on it, each one will be separate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, we are back in session, and we will start with communications from the mayor, C-9. There you go.
Dean J. Mazzarella, Mayor. Request that Melissa Tasker be exempt from the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 268A, subsection 20B, conflict of interest. Melissa is currently employed by the City of Leominster Planning Department and will be taking a position with the City Clerk's Office as an election worker.
C-9 is referred to the chairwoman of Ways and Means.
Thank you, Mr. President. Regular course.
Very well, C-9 has been given regular course. C-10.
Dean J. Mazzarella, Mayor, requests that an appropriation of $35,000 be made to the Veterans Department head account and the same to be transferred from the collective bargaining account, RE cross-training of Veterans Director.
Very well, C-10 is referred to the chairman of finance.
First time on the calendar, Mr. President, regular course.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. C-10 has been given regular course. Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Yeah, through the chair to the finance chair, could you get some detail on that? $35,000 for cross-training a new department head seemed like a lot of money to me. So I'd like to know what that's gonna be spent on.
I can give you a little forecast on that. Mr. Votor wants to work and transition the new veterans director. That's what it amounts to the same time.
You know, if it's but I'd like a breakdown there.
Yeah,
If it's
sure.
salaries, is it,
Just-
some other kind of professional development, it would be helpful.
Yeah, we'll get you some, right, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman?
Yep, absolutely.
Just thought I'd help a little bit with that. All right, moving on to petitions, first time on the agenda, starting with 9-25.
Richard M. Marchand requests to use the following city properties to host the 32nd Annual Johnny Appleseed Arts and Cultural Festival is on Saturday, September 20th, with a rain date of Saturday, September 27th, 2025. The festival shall take place with a setup beginning at 5 o'clock in the morning, with completion by 7 o'clock in the evening. The following city streets and properties: West Street from St. Mark's Church to Main Street, Park Street in its entirety, the City Hall parking lot and city parking lot adjacent to the City Hall, Main Street from the intersection of Mechanic Street to Merriam Ave, the city portion of the parking lot between the First Baptist Church and the First Church Unitarian, all street front businesses, including houses of worship, shall be notified of said closing, as well as being invited to participate.
9-25 is referred to the chairman of property.
Thank you, Mr. President. Regular course with referrals from the police, the fire, and the mayor's office, please.
Very well. 9-25 has been given regular course with referrals to the police, fire department, and the mayor's office. Moving on to 10-20.
DPW also.
Okay, we'll add the DPW to the referral list. Very well. 10-25 is referred to, 10-25.
Peter A. Campobasso, Esquire, on behalf of 5 SAC Self-Storage Corporation, request to amend Section 22-77, underlining district's table of uses of Leominster zoning ordinance under the business uses table of uses and the multi-use 1 MU1 underlining zoning district and change of the self-storage facility use from N, no, not allowed, to either Y, allowed by right, or SPPB, planning board special permit required, according to the Leominster zoning ordinance, self-storage and categorized as a business use, but is only allowed in the industrial zoning district.
10-25 is referred to the chairman of legal affairs.
Thank you, Mr. President. First time on the agenda, regular course with referrals to the planning board and the building commissioner, please.
Very well. 10-25 has been referred to, is giving regular course with referrals to the planning board and building commissioner. Do you want to establish a public hearing this evening?
That would be wise.
I'm going to suggest November 12th at 6:50 p.m. You want to check with your committee, or I'll check with your committee?
Yeah.
Councilor
Poll,
Frida.
please.
Can we also get information on exactly what the plan is for that property? I don't think it's just a straight zoning change. I think there's a plan.
All right. Mr. Chairman, can you look into that for
Yes,
the plans?
maybe the clerk could send a letter to the petitioner asking for a plan, if the plan's available, and any other supporting documents that they make a decision give us the ability to make an informed decision, I should say.
And Councilor Tossi, you okay with the hearing date?
Yes.
And Councilor Cormier?
I agree.
The EMS recommendation is regular course, referral to the planning board, building commissioner, as well as a letter to the proponent, and a further time at an 11/12 public hearing date at 6:50. All in favor, please recognize usual manner. All right, that may be done. Moving on to 11-25. Yep.
I'm sorry, I meant to bring this up. On the second line of 1025, it requests to amend section 22-77. It should read 22-17.
It's a Scrivener's error. Does somebody want to move to amend that?
Motion.
Councilor Robbins, or a second, Councilor Cormier. Any discussion? All in favor of the amendment, please recognize usual manner. All right, so that'll be corrected to section 22-17. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Moving on to 11-25.
Clay Frida, Counselor at Large, requests on behalf of Paul and Lisa Gove of Gove Farm, establish a 25 or 30 mile an hour speed zone on Mechanic Street from the bridge at Johnny Rowe Park at the Lancaster Town Line. Speed to be determined by the Leominster Traffic Department within the Police Department.
11-25 is referred to the Chairman of Public Safety.
It's me.
Oh, okay. To the Chairwoman of
It
Public
is.
Safety.
Yep.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'd like to give this regular course with referrals to the Leominster Police Department as well as the DPW.
Okay. And I was going to suggest, Madam Chairwoman, a public hearing on 10/15 at 6:45, if that works for you.
That works fine.
Okay. All right, so 11-25, we're recommending regular course, referrals to LPD, DPW, and a public hearing on 10/15 at 6:45. All in favor, please recognize usual manner. Anyone opposed? That may be done. Moving on to matters before the City Council and the financial report. Is the Chairman ready to report?
Yes, Mr. President. The opioid stabilization fund began with a balance on July 1, $518,703.20. We had proceeds from the state deposited in the amount of $19,662.08. And that leaves a balance of $538,365.28. The City of Leominster's Stabilization Fund began with a balance on July 1st of $22,927,553.81. We have earned $102,275.69 worth of interest, and we had one appropriation of $4,550.45, which leaves us a balance of $23,025,279.05. And the City of Leominster's Capital Stabilization Fund, we began with a balance of, and we have had no money in or out, so we began and have a balance of $2,193,191.62. And that is a financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to matters under legal affairs. Is the Chairman ready to report?
I am, Mr. President. Thank you. Petition 5-25, Elizabeth Wood, on behalf of the Planning Board, requests that the City Council amend the zoning ordinance pertaining to dimensional requirements for Residence B and Residence C districts. As you know, we had conducted a public hearing earlier this evening. There was obviously quite a bit of interest. There's a lot of questions remain to be answered. We kept this public hearing open, so I'd be recommending further time, and I would ask you to poll members of my committee.
All right, so I'm going to suggest a continued public hearing on this matter for 10:15 at 6:20 p.m., if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. 10:15 at 6:20.
6:20 p.m., and I'll check with Councilor Tossi.
I agree.
Councilor Pauline Cormier.
I agree.
For unanimous recommendation of Legal Affairs Committee to give 5-25 further time and continue the public hearing till October 15th at 6:20 p.m. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please recognize usual manner. Okay, 5-25 has been given further time and continued to 10:15 at 6:20 p.m. for further public hearing. Moving on to 7-25.
Thank you, Mr. President. 7-25 is Elizabeth Wood, on behalf of the Planning Board, requests to amend the zoning ordinance pertaining to upper story dwelling units, Once again, we conducted a public hearing early this evening. Unfortunately, Mr. Boyle from the Montezut Regional Planning Commission had another engagement and was unfortunately had to leave before we had an opportunity to present questions on this petition. Once again, we left the public hearing open. It would be my recommendation that we give the petition further time, and I would ask you to poll members of my committee.
Very well. Again, I'm going to recommend on this one, the continued public hearing be on October 15th at 6:40 PM. And I'll check with Councilor Tossi
I agree.
and Councilor Pauline Cormier.
I agree.
Very unanimous recommendation of the Legal Affairs Committee to grant C-7-25 further time and continue the public hearing to October 15th at 6:40 PM. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please recognize the usual manner. Anyone opposed? By a vote of 9-0, 7-25 is given further time with a continued public hearing on 10/15 at 6:40 PM. Moving on to public service and 2-25.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is 2-25, Massachusetts Electric Company doing business as National Grid. Request permission to locate poles, wires, and fixtures, including the necessary sustaining and protecting fixtures along and across the following public way. Lancaster Street, National Grid to install one solely owned pole on Lancaster Street beginning at a point approximately 190 feet southeast of the center line of the intersection of Central Street and Lancaster Street. National Grid will be installing new pole 2-84 and guy to replace tree guy since the tree is being removed, Leominster, Mass. Location approximately as shown on plan attached. We initially opened the public hearing for this on August 12th. Had many back and forths with regard to the condition of the tree. At our last meeting, a constituent offered to hire an arborist and give us some additional information on the condition of the tree. I spoke with him earlier today, and he had moved in a different direction from that. So seeing the lack of an ulterior opinion on the tree, I'm going to recommend that we grant this petition and ask that you check with the other members of the committee.
Councilor Frida?
I'm a little torn, but I really think the tree should stay. I don't think, it looked pretty healthy. I'm not an arborist. I can't tell, but it just looks so pretty there. And we call ourselves a tree city, and all we keep doing is cutting them down. But if we have no alternative, I'll support the petition.
Okay, Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to support this. I think if the tree has to come down, then it should be replaced. I think if we look throughout the city, taxpayer money is being spent all over the city. We have beautiful, huge, lovely flower pots downtown. A lot of money was recently spent for lighting and a complete redesign of Monument Square. There are other locations in the city where we have flower boxes, and I think this is the one lone tree for people who have been by there that actually greets people on their way in to the city or out of the city using Lancaster Street. So I don't have any qualms about not supporting this. I think it needs to either be left alone or replaced. So I won't be supporting this petition.
Okay. So the unanimous recommendation, Mr. Chairman, well, not the unanimous recommendation, the majority recommendation is to grant 2-25. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Angelini?
Thank you, Mr. President. As I weighed in at the last meeting, I'm fond of trees as well. Unfortunately, this tree is a compliance issue for the Americans with Disabilities Act as well. So, I mean, once the tree comes down at the expense of National Grid, I think it'd be a great opportunity to plant a smaller caliber tree in its spot. It won't be infringing on the sidewalk as much as the current tree is. So I'm going to be supporting it as well, but I just wanted to make that clear. The Americans with Disabilities Act issue is very important to me, and that's why I'll be supporting the petition.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Robbins.
I want to add and kind of echo some of the comments of the counselor to my right. It is not my opinion and not something that I want to continue cutting trees down. I mean, we have heard from constituents, we've heard from the counselors sitting around this table about the climate crisis, and cutting trees down I don't think is the way to do it. I mean, the way I look at it though is, obviously, I am not an arborist. I have information that was provided from the DPW that said the tree is bad and it's causing issues. Without an opposite opinion, I feel kind of in a hard place with regards to this specific tree, and agree with the Ward 5 counselor and the at-large counselor that we should be replacing it with a new tree. So I'll leave my comments there. Thank you.
I just want to clarify for everyone, what we're voting on here is to allow National Grid to erect a pole, which may have, I don't know what the indirect ramifications of that are, but we're not, just so the public knows, we're not voting to cut down a tree. I saw Councilor Cormier's hand, and then I'll go to Councilor Shalfo's effort.
Thank you very much. You must have been reading my mind, because that was a point that I was going to make, is that I've been asked to vote on whether I want to place a pole or not, whether I want to cut down a tree or not. So even if we vote this evening to, place this pole, this gentleman can continue to work with the mayor, and he had mentioned in the past about an easement, and if he can work with the city and get an easement, and they can do whatever they have to do to save the tree and put the pole, because honestly, when you tie off these these poles to these trees, it's putting stress on the tree. It's not healthy for it. And I think that's something that we should try to discourage National Grid from doing in the future. I don't know how much of that they're doing when they're setting poles, how many guy wires they're attaching to trees, but it's really not healthy for the trees because it puts a lot of stress on them. So they shouldn't really be doing that in the first place. They should be taking this guy wire off this tree, even if it's going to stay, because it'll be healthier for the tree. So either way, I'm voting for this, and I think there's plenty of leeway for him to continue to work with the mayor. And either way, I think this should come off of the tree, and it should be attached to one of their poles, not a street tree. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cormier. Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Yeah, thank you very much. The petition is to allow National Grid to put in a new telephone pole. However, if the tree wasn't cut down, then there would be no need for a new telephone pole. So I want to be really clear about that. The tree is accommodating the support that National Grid has had for, we don't know how long, but for a very long time. And then secondly, to address the counselor, the Ward 5 counselor, I don't want anybody to think that I am not sensitive to the ADA challenges, and that's why the sidewalk around the tree base has already been replaced with hardtop to flatten things out so that it is accessible and that people can use it. And it does need to be widened, but the width of the tree versus a new telephone pole, I can't imagine that there's a whole bunch of difference between that width. So there's going to have to be some kind of fix in order to make sure that it is compliant with the new telephone pole. And just as a thing, go around the city when you're driving through the city and look at all the ugly telephone poles and where they're placed. I mean, I think we need to hold National Grid, guy wires, yeah, should they be in trees? Maybe probably not, but can National Grid figure out a way to support their own telephone poles without having to put additional equipment that defaces people's front lawns? I mean, I think that's a reasonable request, and I think that's my expectation. So I am not going to support a brand new telephone pole in a spot coming into downtown Leominster where there's a beautiful tree at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? Councilor Frida.
Just to add to that, and I don't know if there's any accuracy or not, but someone mentioned to me that had watched the last meeting that every telephone pole is violating the ADA requirement. Doesn't have the 3 feet from the pole on the sidewalk. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But just following up on what Councilor Al-Haj mentioned about the tree and the pole distance.
Okay. Councilor Tossi.
Do we know if the tree's healthy, or Can it be, is it savable? Is it?
Counselor Angelini, I think, may have information for you on that.
Quoting a letter again that we received from the DPW back on, unfortunately, it's not dated, but they cite what's the name of the company, Life, hold on. Well, that company here we go. The company that was hired to do the tree survey for all the trees that are located in the city within the power, the telephone or electric easement, they are arborists. They do have arborists in the field. And they're the ones that said this tree suffers from crown dieback. It also suffers from, so crown dieback is obviously, if you look at the top of the tree, the branches at the very top of the tree don't have leaves. So that's not a very good sign for a tree. Also, the tree has what they identify as multiple stems, so the tree probably should have had some pruning early on, because the leaders, all these little sucker branches grow out of them, then they become isolated in the wintertime and they come down. So I'm just going, again, the city paid for this tree survey back in 2022, so it wasn't that old, just a couple of years ago. And again, this company is called Plant IT Geo. And like I said, that survey is available if you want to call DPW. They'd be happy to share it with you. And so, I mean, I think there's a lot of thought that went into this decision. I'm sure that and the DPW certainly doesn't want to use their budget to take this tree down at a later date when, and just to touch on this, it's my understanding we had a pole issue, if I recall, it was on West Street, and the representative from National Grid was going to attach a guy wire to a totem, to a tree that was basically just a totem pole, because their new policy is they don't attach them to live trees anymore. So that's my understanding, and there was a gentleman here earlier we could have asked, but he left. I think he realized your hearing had already happened, so. But I'm just, again, I think we have documentation from DPW and from the third party, Planet Geo, that's been in business for 12 years and does GIS tree surveys, that this tree is not healthy. I mean, it may look healthy, but if you look at the top, it does have that crown dieback, among other problems. So this isn't like, you know, a tree that may end up at what's the place in Worcester, the Botanical Garden?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm just going back to what the DPW provided us initially on this petition.
Okay, anything further? Councilor Arender.
Just a comment, you know, I hate telephone poles. They're the ugliest thing in the world, and I certainly agree with the council at large. But the unfortunate thing is that if this tree is unhealthy, as they stated, it would fall on Lancaster Street. And that's an issue that we don't want to have to face. God forbid something happens and it falls when a car's going past. Yeah. It's happened in other areas, so as much as I regret having to take this tree down, I want to support this petition.
Okay. Anything further? I don't like telephone poles either. I do like electricity.
Anybody could like a telephone.
Somebody's got to come up with a better plan to get it into our homes without telephone poles, maybe at some point.
It would be nice if we could force National Grid to put everything underground.
Amen.
Yeah,
But no, that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen in our lifetime. All right. I'm going to do this by roll call, starting with Councilor David Cormier.
Yay.
Councilor Pauline Cormier.
Yay.
Councilor Arender.
Yay.
Councilor Angelini.
Yay.
Councilor Tossi.
Nay.
Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Nay.
Councilor Brandon Robbins.
Yay.
Councilor Frida.
Do I have the prerogative to change my vote?
Of course you do.
Nay.
And I will be recorded as yay, so I believe this passes by a vote of 6-3, if my math is correct.
That's correct.
No offense to the Ward 3 councilor, but there's nothing attractive about wires either.
It provides jobs, that's for sure.
especially telephone wires. Because we all know whose employer is Verizon. All right, we're moving. Do we have anything on the new business? Then we're moving on to old business, and the Legal Affairs Chair has some second readings.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a second reading of an ordinance formally petition 48-24. Again, a second reading of an ordinance. The City of Leominster, an ordinance in the year 2024, be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Leominster as follows. Article 3 of the zoning ordinance entitled Table of Uses is hereby amended by inserting the following sentence to the end of the first paragraph of said Article 3. Any use not listed in the underlying district's table of uses and/or the overlay district's table of uses is hereby prohibited. Mr. President, it would be my recommendation that we adopt the second reading of the ordinance, and I would ask you to poll members of my committee.
Very well, Councilor Robert Tossi
I agree.
and Councilor Cormier.
I agree.
You've heard the unanimous recommendation of the Legal Affairs Committee to adopt the second reading of the ordinance formally 48-24. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, this will be by roll call, starting with Councilor David Cormier.
Yay.
Councilor Pauline Cormier.
Yay.
Councilor Arndinger.
Yay.
Councilor Angelini.
Yay.
Councilor Tossi.
Yay.
Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Yay.
Councilor Robbins.
Yay.
Councilor Frida.
Yay.
I'll be recorded as yay. The second reading is adopted by a vote of 9-0. Moving on to the second reading.
Say that 3 times quickly, Mr. President. Okay. This is a second reading of an ordinance formally 6-25. The City of Leominster, in the year 2024, an ordinance, be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Leominster as follows. Amending Chapter 13 of the revised ordinances entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic. Section 13-77 of the revised ordinances entitled Stop Signs is hereby amended by inserting the following. View Street against southeastbound drivers at Grandview Avenue. View Street against northwestbound drivers at Grandview Avenue. Mr. President, it would be my recommendation that we adopt the second reading of this ordinance, and I would ask you to poll members of my committee.
Councilor Tossi.
I agree.
Councilor Cormier. Pauline Cormier.
I agree.
You've heard the unanimous recommendation of the Legal Affairs Committee to grant the second reading of an ordinance formally 6-25. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, this will be by roll call, starting with Councilor David Cormier.
Yay.
Pauline Cormier.
Yay.
Councilor Arndinger.
Yay.
Councilor Angelini.
Yay.
Councilor Tossi.
Yay.
Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Yay.
Councilor Robbins.
Yay.
Councilor Frida.
Yay.
And I'll be recorded as yay. The second reading of the ordinance is adopted. Councilor Shalfo Zephyr?
I have old business.
Okay. You may proceed.
Great, thank you. So this is about the athletic complex that has been before us a few times up behind Leominster High School. The Ward 4 counselor and myself, over the years, have had several different meetings with folks from up there. And the plan has gone through a few iterations, and recently was posted online, is going out to bid. I got calls from the neighborhood, very upset because they were expecting to have an opportunity to provide feedback and see the final plan before it went out to bid. I understand that. I called the mayor, I didn't call the mayor, but I exchanged messages with the mayor and said the neighbors really wanted a meeting. And the mayor said, well, it's going out to bid. And when it comes back with price tags attached, at that point, from his perspective, it would make sense then to meet with the neighbors to say, we've got a $10 million budget, and it's a $15 million or $12 million project, and these are the options that we can cut or discuss or redesign. So neighbors weren't happy with that, but that's the situation, and that's where it is. So the project is going out to bid, and then once the bids are back, the mayor will convene, I guess, another meeting of the neighborhood to discuss either redesign or how the plan is going to go forward. But I just wanted to give that update for the neighbors because they were very upset.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Frida?
Just to follow up on that, because I can't remember the details, can we have the finance chair find out how much money we voted on for that?
$5 million bond.
Yeah, it wasn't much.
A long time ago.
long time
The
ago.
bond authorization would be obsolete at this point, so how the mayor plans to fund that, I'm not sure. But I think we'll see that.
And I also believe we've I'll double check, tucked some other money away at the end of a few fiscal years when we were spending a ton of money in June, right? We started to kind of put some money, but I'll get all the figures.
Well, the mayor said to me that he had a $10 million grant set aside. So the number in his mind is $10 million. So if the bids come in higher than $10 million, then, you know, the architect or the designer has to go back to the drawing board and convene again with the neighbors to make sure that they're all in line with whatever changes.
There may be bid alternatives too that were tied to that, so there's a pretty good chance we're gonna see that officially, but, you know,
Right.
unofficially, we have to deal with it as well.
Yep.
Okay, anything else? All right, community calendar? I'll just update the public on Johnny Appleseed 250th anniversary. On the 26th, which is actually, strike that, on the 25th, there's a family film night at the library at 6:30 p.m., where the library is permitted to show some of the things that you know, you can't show in other venues because of the educational exemption. They will be showing the Disney from 1948 Melody Tunes, Johnny Appleseed, which really put Johnny Appleseed on the map, quite frankly. If you haven't seen it, it is a great little cartoon. You can see it at the library and other Johnny Appleseed films. That's the 25th, Wednesday, at 6:30. On the following day, the 26th, which is actually Johnny Appleseed's birthday, there will be a media event and press conference at the Visitor Center out on Route 2 at 8:45, attended by another number of public officials. You're all invited, as well as the public, to attend. That morning from 11 to 2 o'clock, the Postal Service will be canceling envelopes provided free of charge to the public at the library. There's about 300 pieces available, one to a customer, free, first come, first served. On the 5th of October, there's an event, that's a Saturday, at the Historical Society. They'll be dedicating the Chutter Stone, which was used to make cider, out in the front of the building. That same evening, from 6 to 9, there's a ball at the library, also free of charge, with a big band entertaining. Then, of course, October 12th, which is the last event, is the Shoalin Farms Harvest Festival. Councilor Frida.
Oh, go ahead, you're done.
The only other thing I would say is that, I think it's all over now, but you can probably get it on ULocal or the Chronicle website. Tonight's episode of Chronicle was about apples and Johnny Appleseed, and there were a number of Leominster venues on the broadcast. I'm done.
I just wanted to mention October 5th, there'll also be a bridge dedication on Route 2
yes.
in honor of Captain Ross Reynolds. The dedication will be on the bridge at the connector, and then there'll be a dedication of his stone that's already been put up at the Veterans Center. So I believe it's 1:30 at the bridge.
Okay, anybody else have anything? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Councilor Cormier, second. Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
The Leominster City Council meeting is funded in part by DeCarolis Insurance Agency at www.decarolisinsuranceagency.com and by Avidia Bank at www.avidiabank.com.